What would you do if a billionaire offered to marry you on the spot, not for love, but because your blood could save his life? This isn't a hypothetical question. It's the extraordinary situation that changed Xiaoi's life forever. One moment, she was a poor girl struggling to pay for her father's medical bills. The next, she was engaged to one of the richest men in the country. Her secret blood that glows blue when exposed to water was no longer something to hide, but something worth millions. But wealth comes with dangerous enemies, and Xiaoi quickly learned that being Mrs. Shen meant navigating a world of jealousy, betrayal, and unexpected love. Her rare blood may have secured her marriage, but would it be enough to keep her alive? If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, a like and a subscribe would mean the world to me. It really helps the channel grow and keeps you in the loop for all the latest content. What would you do if the thing you've hidden your entire life became your only chance at survival? Xiaoi's fingers trembled as she touched the small scar on her palm, a reminder of her 7th birthday, when she'd learned the truth about herself. She remembered the horror in her father's eyes when her blood had dripped into a puddle, illuminating the murky water with an ethereal blue glow. That day, her childhood innocence had shattered, replaced by a burden of secrecy that would shape her entire existence. Little devil, no matter when, don't let others know your blood will glow when it drops into water. Do you understand? Her father's words, urgent and fearful, had become the foundation of her life's philosophy. Each time she cut herself, each monthly cycle, each medical test became a potential exposure, a risk that someone might discover her abnormality. She'd grown accustomed to carrying bandages, avoiding swimming, making excuses for not participating in activities where her blood might be exposed. Her entire identity had formed around concealing this luminescent secret. Their small apartment on the outskirts of the city reflected the modest means of their existence. The peeling wallpaper and worn furniture were familiar companions in a life defined by careful budgeting and simple needs. Xiaoi had never minded their poverty. Her father's love and protection had always been enough. But now, as she sat beside his hospital bed, watching his once, the doctor's words echoed in her mind as she counted the meager savings in their joint account. 800,000 for the specialized treatment her father needed. The number might as well have been 8 million for all their ability to pay it. 3 jobs and selling everything of value had barely made a dent in the amount. Her father was dying, and she was powerless to stop it. Xiaoi pressed her forehead against the cold hospital window, her reflection ghostly against the night sky. The weight of her secret had never felt heavier. For years, she'd hidden her condition out of fear of being labeled a monster, of being studied or ostracized. The memory of villagers' whispers when she was young had taught her that difference was dangerous. Yet now, that very difference might be the key to saving the one person who had protected her all these years. She'd first heard about Mr. Shen's search from a nurse whispering to another in the hospital corridor. He's paying millions for women with that condition, the blue blood thing, testing them like lab rats. But the money? The nurse had stopped speaking when she noticed Xiaoi nearby. But the seed had been planted. Later, she'd found online forums discussing the wealthy CEO's search, speculating about his motivations and the generous compensation offered to suitable candidates. That night, Xiaoi couldn't sleep. The rhythmic beeping of her father's monitors provided a soundtrack to her racing thoughts. If what they said was true, then she was the most suitable person for whatever testing Mr. Shen required. The thought made her stomach clench with fear. Revealing her secret went against everything her father had taught her, everything she believed about protecting herself. Yet watching him struggle for breath, seeing the mountain of medical bills growing daily, what choice did she have? "If I tell them, I might save you," she whispered to her sleeping father. "But I'll be exposing the very thing you taught me to hide." Her throat tightened as conflicting emotions battled within her. The fear of exposing herself warred with the desperate need to save her father. What if they treated her like a laboratory specimen rather than a human being? What if the villagers had been right, and she truly was a monster that deserved to be hidden away? Morning came, and with it, a clarity born of desperation. Xiaoi made her decision. She would approach the Shen Corporation. She would reveal her secret. The alternative, watching her father die when she might have saved him, was unthinkable. As she packed a small bag with her identification documents and a few personal items she couldn't bear to leave behind, Xiaoi felt something she hadn't experienced in years. A strange sense of relief mingled with her terror. Soon, she would no longer be the only one who knew her secret. The bus ride across the city gave her too much time to think, to doubt, to panic. Several times she nearly pulled the stop cord, ready to abandon her plan and return to her father's side. "I can't breathe," she whispered to herself, drawing curious glances from nearby passengers. The anxiety of revealing her condition after decades of careful concealment felt like a physical weight on her chest. With each mile that brought her closer to the Shen Corporation headquarters, that weight grew heavier. When the massive glass building came into view, Xiaoi felt her breath catch. The structure towered over the surrounding city, a monument to wealth and power that seemed to exist in an entirely different world from her own. Sunlight reflected off its mirrored surface, nearly blinding her as she approached the entrance. How many women had walked this same path, hoping to be what Mr. Shen was looking for? How many had been turned away, their blood ordinary and unremarkable? The security guards at the entrance regarded her with thinly veiled skepticism as she explained her purpose. Her worn clothes and nervous demeanor clearly marked her as an outsider in this realm of corporate luxury. Only when she mentioned Mr. Shen's search did their expressions change from dismissive to alert. A phone call was made, hushed words exchanged, and suddenly Xiaoi found herself being escorted through the vast lobby toward a private elevator. "Wait here," the guard instructed as they reached a sterile white room several floors up. "Someone will be with you shortly." The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt irrevocable. Xiaoi stood alone in the center of the room, heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard through the walls. A single chair, a small table with a glass of water, a camera in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. This was her moment of truth. Years of hiding, of protecting her secret, had led to this point. Now she would voluntarily expose what she had been taught to conceal her entire life. When the door opened again, a woman in a crisp lab coat entered, carrying a small tray of medical supplies. Her expression was professionally neutral as she explained the testing procedure. A small blood sample, contact with water, observation and documentation, simple steps that would change everything. Xiaoi extended her arm, rolling up her sleeve with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The needle's prick was nothing compared to the emotional pain of this moment. As the vial filled with her rich, dark blood, looking perfectly normal in its current state, she thought of her father's warnings, his protection, his love. She was betraying his greatest lesson to save his life. The irony wasn't lost on her. When the doctor dropped a small amount of her blood into a clear dish of water, the transformation was immediate and undeniable. The liquid illuminated with an otherworldly blue glow, casting eerie shadows across the white room. The doctor's scientific detachment faltered for a moment, her eyes widening at the luminescent display. "Remarkable," she whispered, before regaining her composure. "Mr. Shen will want to see this immediately." As Xiaoi watched her blood glow in the dish, a strange calm settled over her. The secret was out. Whatever happened next, tests, questions, payment, consequences, she had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. For better or worse, she had chosen this path. The massive doors of the Shen Corporation closed behind her as she was led deeper into the building, each step taking her further from the life she had known. Xiaoi felt the weight of years of secrecy lifting, replaced by the uncertainty of what was to come. She had no way of knowing that this decision, made in desperate love for her father, would alter the course of her life in ways she could never have imagined. That beyond those doors waited not just a potential savior for her father, but a destiny that would transform her from a woman in hiding to someone who would never need to hide again. While Xiaoi entered the unknown, 32 floors above her, a man stared out at the city he had conquered, a city that would soon belong to his memory alone. Mr. Shen stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his reflection ghostly in the glass, just as his presence had become throughout his own company. His once commanding frame had withered, the tailored suit hanging loosely on shoulders that had carried an empire, but now struggled to support their own weight. The medical report on his desk was unopened. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. Another failed treatment, another specialist with no answers, another countdown of the dwindling days he had left. His personal physician, Dr. Zhang, stood silently behind him, waiting for a response that wouldn't come. They had played this scene too many times before. "The board is requesting your presence at tomorrow's quarterly meeting," his assistant said from the doorway, pretending not to notice how Mr. Shen's hand trembled as it gripped the windowsill. "Should I inform them you'll be attending virtually again?" Mr. Shen didn't turn around. The city below, with its skyline dominated by buildings bearing his name, seemed to mock him now. 27 years of ruthless ambition, of 16-hour days and strategic brilliance, had transformed him from a factory worker's son into one of the most powerful men in Asia. The Shen Corporation sprawled across industries like a colossus: technology, pharmaceuticals, real estate. He had built it from nothing, through determination that bordered on obsession, and now it was slipping through his fingers like sand. "Tell them I'll be there," he said, his voice a shadow of the commanding tone that once made boardrooms fall silent. His assistant hesitated, exchanged a glance with Dr. Zhang, then nodded and withdrew. "You're not strong enough," Dr. Zhang said after the door closed. "Your last round of tests showed—" "I know what they showed," Mr. Shen snapped, finally turning from the window. The movement cost him, a flash of pain crossing his face before he could mask it. "Just as I know what will happen if the board realizes how bad things have gotten. Chen is already positioning himself. 2 more absences, and they'll call for an emergency succession vote." The illness had come without warning 6 months ago. Fatigue first, then pain that medication couldn't touch, then the alarming symptoms that sent specialists flying in from around the world. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was a medical curiosity. A rare toxin building in his blood, destroying him from the inside out. The world's top doctors stood helpless before it. Experimental treatments had followed, each more desperate than the last. Mr. Shen moved carefully to his desk, lowering himself into the chair that had once felt like a throne, but now seemed a prison. The photograph beside his computer showed a younger version of himself, cutting the ribbon at the opening of his first factory. That man, confident, unstoppable, was becoming increasingly unrecognizable to him. "The shaman in Mongolia," he said suddenly, "the one who talked about blood that glows. Have we followed up on that?" Zhang sighed. "Sir, we've discussed this. That was a local superstition, not medical science. The idea that people with luminescent blood could somehow draw toxins from another person's body. And yet you've found nothing better to offer me," Mr. Shen cut in, his voice gaining strength through anger. "Your science has failed me. Your specialists have failed me. I'm willing to try what you call superstition if it gives me even the slightest chance." The search had grown increasingly desperate as conventional medicine reached its limits. Mr. Shen had consulted faith healers in the Philippines, undergone experimental stem cell treatments in Switzerland, even permitted a controversial brain stimulation procedure in Israel. Nothing had slowed the progress of his disease. It was during a particularly dark night, when pain had kept him from sleep, that he'd remembered the Mongolian shaman's words about people whose blood glowed blue in water, people who could pull toxins from others through proximity and transfer. The shaman had called them living filters, claiming they were scattered throughout Asia, most unaware of their own power. The next morning, Mr. Shen had ordered a nationwide search, offering millions for women with this condition to come forward for testing. His medical team had objected strenuously, warning him against placing hope in folklore. But as conventional options disappeared, Mr. Shen had grown more willing to embrace the unconventional, and his absence had not gone unnoticed in the corporate world. Stock prices had begun to waver as rumors of his illness spread. Competitors circled like sharks scenting blood. Within his own company, ambitious executives had started positioning themselves for succession, their concern for his health thinly veiling their ambition. The empire he had built with ruthless precision was showing the first signs of fracture. Projects stalled without his decisive leadership. Key clients requested meetings he was too weak to attend. The business press had begun publishing speculative pieces about the future of Shen Corporation after its founder. He had never imagined dying like this, not in pain and weakness, but in irrelevance. Watching everything he had built begin to crumble while he still breathed seemed a crueler fate than death itself. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His security chief entered without waiting for permission, a habit that would have earned a reprimand months ago, but now passed without comment. "Sir, we've found one," the man said, his usual stoicism cracked by excitement. A young woman just arrived at the main building. She tested positive during the initial screening. Her blood glows exactly as described. The lab team is with her now, running the full panel. Mr. Shen straightened in his chair, ignoring the pain the sudden movement caused. "How strong is the reaction?" "The strongest they've seen, sir." The technician said. It illuminated the entire sample. For the first time in months, Mr. Shen felt something other than resignation or anger. Could it be possible? After all the failed treatments and false hopes, had this desperate search actually yielded results? "Where is she from?" he asked, already reaching for his jacket. "Small apartment complex on the east side. Apparently, she came because her father needs expensive medical treatment. She seems unaware of the potential significance of her condition." Draxo stepped forward. "Sir, I must caution against excessive optimism. Even if this woman's blood does exhibit the properties described in the folklore, there's no scientific evidence that—" "Prepare the testing suite," Mr. Shen interrupted, struggling to his feet, "and have the suite grant up the necessary consent forms. If her blood is compatible, I want to begin immediately." He moved toward the door with purpose that had been absent for months. The security chief fell in step beside him, automatically slowing his pace to match his employer's labored steps. When they reached the private elevator, Mr. Shen paused, leaning against the wall momentarily to gather strength. He caught his reflection in the polished metal doors, sunken eyes, sallow skin, a ghost of the man who had once commanded fear and respect with a glance. But in those eyes now burned something that had been missing: hope. The elevator descended, carrying him toward the young woman who had unknowingly brought the first positive news in months. He had no way of knowing then how significantly this moment would alter not just his prognosis, but the very trajectory of his life. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a laboratory that gleamed like an otherworldly sanctuary beneath harsh fluorescent lights. As Mr. Shen stepped into the sterile environment, his eyes immediately found the young woman seated nervously in the corner. Xiaoi's worn cotton dress and scuffed shoes stood in stark contrast to the immaculate white surfaces and cutting-edge equipment surrounding her. She clutched her weathered handbag with white knuckles, unaware that within hours they would be discussing not just a medical procedure, but marriage terms that would bind their fates in ways no ordinary contract could capture. Their eyes met across the room. Mr. Shen noted her trembling hands and the way she quickly lowered her gaze. This unassuming girl, with her simple appearance and nervous demeanor, held within her veins the miracle he had searched for across continents. The juxtaposition was almost poetic. Probably cost more than she earned in months, yet he stood before her as the supplicant, his life potentially in her hands. "Miss Zhang," Mr. Shen said, his voice softer than the commanding tone his employees were accustomed to. "Thank you for coming today. I understand the testing process has already begun." The chief physician stepped forward, tablet in hand. We've completed the preliminary analysis, Mr. Shen. The results are... He paused, glancing at Xiaoi before continuing. Extraordinary. Her blood contains precisely the properties described in the Mongolian texts. When exposed to the toxin samples from your bloodstream, the luminescent compounds initiate a binding process we've never observed before. Mr. Shen's expression remained carefully neutral, though his pulse quickened. And the compatibility? 100%, the doctor replied. The highest we've seen by a significant margin. The biochemical markers in her blood appear specifically suited to neutralize the compounds affecting your system. Xiaoi shifted uncomfortably under their clinical discussion. She had expected to be paid for a blood donation, perhaps a series of them. The doctors had explained little during their tests, only that her condition was precisely what Mr. Shen had been searching for. As they continued discussing her blood as though she were merely a specimen, she gathered her courage. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible at first. When neither man responded, she spoke again, louder. "Excuse me, I'd like to know what happens now. How much will you pay for my blood?" Mr. Shen turned to her, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to disappear. "The treatment isn't as simple as a blood donation, may I call you Xiaoi?" Without waiting for her response, he continued. "According to our research, the properties in your blood must be continuously introduced to my system over time. It's not a one-time transfusion, but a prolonged process requiring consistent proximity." The doctor nodded. "The treatment protocol would require daily proximity for a minimum of 6 months, possibly longer. The biochemical exchange appears to be most effective when the donor and recipient maintain physical closeness." Xiaoi's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. You want me to stay here? For months?" "Exactly," Mr. Shen replied, glancing at the doctor. "Could you give us a moment alone?" After the medical team filed out, Mr. Shen took a seat across from Xiaoi. For the first time, she noticed the subtle signs of his illness, the slight yellowish tint to his skin, the careful way he lowered himself into the chair, as though each movement required calculation. "What I'm about to propose may sound unusual," he began, his tone businesslike, yet careful. "But I assure you, it's the most efficient solution to our mutual concerns." He paused, seeming to measure his next words. "I'm proposing marriage." The word hung in the air between them. Xiaoi blinked, certain she had misheard. "Marriage?" she repeated, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. "Yea, a marriage of convenience, arranged with clear terms and considerable compensation," Mr. Shen continued. "The treatment requires your consistent presence in my life. Marriage would provide the legal framework for such an arrangement, ensuring your permanent proximity while offering you financial security." Xiaoi's mind reeled as she processed his words. This wasn't the fairy tale proposal girls dreamed about. There were no declarations of love, no romantic gestures. Instead, it was presented like any other business transaction, complete with terms and conditions. "But we don't know each other," she whispered, the obvious objection feeling inadequate even as she voiced it. Mr. Shen nodded. "Precisely why everything would be outlined in a contract. Your obligations would be clearly defined, primarily remaining within proximity for the treatment duration and participating in the medical protocol." He leaned forward slightly. "In return, you would receive financial compensation that would more than cover your father's medical expenses. Additionally, you would have access to resources and opportunities previously unavailable to you." Xiaoi's thoughts whirled to her father, lying in a hospital bed with mounting bills. The sum Mr. Shen was subtly promising could save him and secure their future. Yet the price was her freedom, her identity, her life as she knew it. "This arrangement isn't without historical precedent," Mr. Shen added, perhaps sensing her hesitation. "Throughout history, marriages have been strategic alliances driven by political or economic motivations. Royal families used marriage to forge alliances and secure territories. The marriage of Isabella I in 1469 united powerful kingdoms in Spain, creating the foundation for a unified nation. His academic tone made the proposal feel less personal, as though they were discussing a historical fact rather than her future. Liakia wondered if he spoke this way to make the transaction easier for her, or for himself. "Would this be permanent?" she asked, her voice small. "The contract would include provisions for dissolution after the treatment concludes, should you wish it," he replied, "though the legal marriage would remain in place until such time, with all the social obligations that entails." An attendant entered with a sleek leather portfolio, placing it before Mr. Shen. He opened it, to reveal a multi-page document, already prepared. Had he been so certain of her blood, of her desperation, that the contract was drafted before they'd even met? "This outlines everything. The financial arrangements, your obligations, the dissolution terms. My lawyers have been thorough," he said, sliding the contract toward her. "You're welcome to have your own legal representation review it, of course." Xiaoi stared at the document, understanding perhaps half the terminology. What she did understand was the figure on page 3, a sum that would not only cover her father's treatment, but would ensure neither of them would ever worry about money again. "What about," she hesitated, embarrassed by the question forming on her lips, "what about normal marriage things?" Mr. Shen's expression remained neutral. "The contract specifies our relationship will be one of mutual respect and appropriate public appearance. Private arrangements are outlined in..." Xiaoi's cheeks burned as she flipped to the indicated page. The clinical language described a marriage without emotional or physical intimacy, a business arrangement in every sense. As she read through the document, she thought about the psychological impact such an arrangement might have. She would experience a dramatic shift in social status and lifestyle. Without an emotional connection, she might feel isolated in his world of wealth and privilege. The contract addressed her material needs, but what about the emotional toll? What choice did she have? Her father's life hung in the balance, and here was a solution, albeit an unusual one, that could save him. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, though I should note that my condition worsens daily," Mr. Shen replied, his subtle reminder landing like a weight on her conscience. 3 days later, Xiaoi sat in Mr. Shen's office, pen hovering over the signature line. She had visited her father, explained as much as she could, and made her decision. The pen felt unusually heavy in her hand as she signed, the scratch of ink on paper sealing her fate. Mr. Shen signed after her, his expression inscrutable. "The arrangements have been made. We'll be married tomorrow in a private ceremony." With a single signature, Xiaoi exchanged one life for another. She would move from poverty to unimaginable wealth, from anonymity to the scrutiny that came with being Mrs. Shen. Her blood would save a dying man, and in return, she would gain financial security and a place in a world she'd only glimpsed from afar. 24 hours after signing away her former life, Xiaoi stood frozen in her new bedroom, a space larger than her entire childhood home. The sheer opulence surrounding her felt like a beautiful mirage that might dissolve if she blinked too hard or breathed too deeply. Her fingertips traced the silk bedspread, its smooth texture so foreign compared to the threadbare cotton she'd slept under her entire life. The wardrobe alone contained more clothes than she'd owned in all her 23 years, each garment bearing price tags that could have covered months of her father's medical bills. "Mrs. Shen, would you like assistance preparing for dinner?" A uniformed maid appeared at the doorway, her expression a careful mask that couldn't quite hide her assessment of the new mistress. The title still sounded like it belonged to someone else. A real Mrs. Shen, not a girl who until yesterday had been serving coffee in a 24-hour diner. "What time is dinner?" Xiaoi asked, hoping her voice didn't betray her unease. 7 o'clock sharp. Mr. Shen appreciates punctuality. The maid's tone carried a subtle warning. "The chef has prepared sea bass with a truffle reduction. I've laid out 3 appropriate dinner options in your dressing room." Dressing room. Of course, there was a separate room just for changing clothes. Xiaoi nodded, as though this were perfectly normal. as though she hadn't been living in a world where a single room served as bedroom, living room, and dining area all at once. The first real test came at dinner. Seated at a table that stretched longer than a bus, Xiaoi stared at the dizzying array of utensils flanking her plate. Each fork, knife, and spoon seemed to mock her with its specific, unknown purpose. When the first course arrived, something delicate involving raw fish and foam, she discreetly watched Mr. Shen select his utensils before mimicking his movement. "The chef trained in Paris," Mr. Shen remarked between bites, his eyes clinical as they assessed her reaction to the food. "Is it to your liking?" "It's interesting," she replied honestly, the unfamiliar flavors dancing on her tongue. In truth, she would have preferred a simple bowl of her father's homemade noodles to this extravagant display of culinary artistry. Mr. Shen's mouth twitched, almost forming a smile. "You'll develop a palate for it. Most things are acquired tastes, including wealth," Xiaoi thought, "including belonging." The mansion operated like its own small country, with rigid protocols governing every aspect of daily life. The morning after her arrival, Xiaoi attempted to make her own bed, only to be intercepted by an alarmed housekeeper who insisted such tasks weren't suitable for Mrs. Shen. When she tried to wash her own teacup, the kitchen staff exchanged meaningful glances that spoke volumes about her ignorance of proper household hierarchy. The bathroom in her suite proved particularly challenging, with its digital shower panel featuring more settings than her old apartment had light switches. Her first attempt resulted in alternating jets of scalding and freezing water, shooting from unexpected directions, leaving her both drenched and humiliated when a maid had to rescue her. "Perhaps Madam would like a demonstration," the maid offered, her tone hovering between helpful and condescending. These encounters with staff revealed the invisible social minefields she'd stepped into. Some, like the elderly gardener, who had served the Shen family for decades, regarded her with undisguised curiosity. Others, particularly those who had served Mr. Shen's inner circle, watched her with pitying eyes, as though witnessing a catastrophe in slow motion. A few treated her with open disdain, their service performed with technical perfection but glacial coldness. "Your new wardrobe has arrived, Mrs. Shen," announced the personal stylist who appeared in her room one morning, trailed by assistants carrying boxes from designers whose names Xiaoi had only seen in magazines. "We've curated selections based on your new position. These pieces will be appropriate for various social obligations." The styling session that followed felt like cultural immersion therapy. Xiaoi learned that clothing wasn't just covering, but communication, fabrics, colors, and cuts, all broadcasting specific messages about status and belonging. The stylist's running commentary became a crash course in upper-class signaling. "This is appropriate for charity luncheons," the stylist explained, holding up a conservative dress in a subtle pattern. "And this would work for board member dinners." Another outfit, slightly more formal. "These are casual options for weekend events at the country club, board dinners, charity luncheons." Each phrase represented an alien landscape Xiaoi would be expected to navigate with confidence. She did. Her most grounding moments came during visits to her father at the private medical facility where Mr. Shen had arranged his care. The luxury suite, with its panoramic views and round-the-clock nursing staff, was worlds away from the overcrowded public hospital where he'd previously been treated. "If you can find such a good husband, Dad is relieved," her father said during one visit, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and discomfort with their reversed fortunes. The familiar wrinkles around his eyes deepened as he studied his daughter in her designer clothes. Xiaoi took his weathered hand in hers, the connection to her past anchoring her amid the sea of change. "Are they treating you well here?" "Too well," he admitted with a small laugh. "The nurses scold me when I try to clean my own room or fold my laundry. They say it's their job, not mine." Xiaoi smiled, recognizing her own struggles. "I know exactly how that feels. These visits became her sanctuary, the only place where she didn't need to calculate her every word and gesture. But even these moments were changing, the economic disparity between them creating a subtle strain that hadn't existed before. Her father's pride collided with his gratitude, creating a complex new dynamic they were both learning to navigate. The business side of Mr. Shen's world presented its own challenges. Xiaoi's presence was requested at select meetings and social gatherings, where she encountered the power players in his empire. Each introduction came with probing glances and whispered questions about her background. The narrative of her sudden appearance in Mr. Shen's life created suspicion and speculation that followed her like a shadow. "Mrs. Shen, what a surprise to finally meet you," one board member's wife commented at a corporate dinner, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Your marriage was so sudden, almost magical how quickly it all happened." The subtext wasn't subtle. She didn't earn her place at this table. During a particularly tense business lunch, Xiaoi overheard a colleague mutter to another, "Wonder which desperate situation drove him to marry her. Must be terminal." The irony of his accidental accuracy might have been amusing if it hadn't cut so close to the truth. She was here because of Mr. Shen's terminal diagnosis, though not in the way these observers assumed. Despite these challenges, Xiaoi began developing strategies for survival. She befriended Ming, the head chef, by showing genuine interest in his culinary techniques. In return, he discreetly explained the purpose of mysterious utensils before formal dinners. The elder housekeeper, Mrs. Liu, softened toward her after Xiaoi asked for guidance with genuine humility rather than presumed authority. Small victories accumulated. She mastered the shower controls. She learned which fork to use for salad. She memorized the names of Mr. Shen's key executives and their spouses. Each tiny triumph built her confidence for the next challenge. Mr. Shen himself remained an enigma, their interactions limited to the medical treatments and occasional meals. Yet she noticed his gaze lingering on her with increasing interest as she navigated the complexities of his world with growing confidence. The medical wing beneath the mansion held secrets darker than the business whispers that followed Youre through dinner parties. A treatment protocol that would transform both patient and healer in ways science couldn't explain. As the doctors prepared the first transfusion, not one person in the room suspected that drawing toxins from Mr. Shen's blood would awaken dormant abilities in the woman who had agreed to save him. "This will feel uncomfortable," the lead physician warned, his voice clinical as he inserted the specialized needle into Xiaoi's arm. "Your unique blood composition will act as a filtration system. As Mr. Shen's blood passes through the machine and mingles with yours, the toxins will be drawn from his system into yours." Xiaoi watched the crimson liquid flow through the transparent tubes, connecting her to both the machine and to Mr. Shen. She hadn't understood until this moment what drawing toxins truly meant. The contract had mentioned potential discomfort and temporary side effects, but as the first wave of burning sensation spread through her veins, she realized those sterile terms had drastically understated the reality. "Your body has natural detoxification processes," the doctor continued, monitoring the screens displaying their vital signs. "But the concentration of toxins you'll be absorbing will typically take months to process. We'll be supplementing with medications to assist your liver and kidneys, but there's no avoiding the strain this will place on your system." Mr. Shen watched her face from his treatment chair, his expression unreadable as the process continued. When the first session ended, he seemed marginally more energetic, while Xiaoi could barely stand, her skin clammy and her breathing shallow. The staff helped her to her room, where she spent the next 12 hours alternating between violent nausea and bone-deep chills. By the third treatment, a pattern emerged. Each session left Mr. Shen visibly improved, his skin tone healthier, his movements more fluid, while Xiaoi deteriorated. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes, and her once graceful movements became hesitant as persistent dizziness plagued her. "Your white blood cell count is concerning," the doctor told her during their weekly evaluation. And your liver function tests show early signs of strain. We need to adjust the treatment schedule to give your body more recovery time. Xiaoi shook her head. The contract specifies daily treatments. Mr. Shen is improving faster than expected. We continue as planned. That night, alone in her room, Xiaoi reached for the glass of water on her nightstand. A sudden wave of nausea hit her, and she closed her eyes, bracing herself against another round of side effects. When she opened them, the glass hovered 6 inches above the surface, suspended in midair, without support. With a gasp of shock, the connection, whatever it was, broke, and the glass crashed to the floor. She stared at the shattered pieces, heart pounding. Had she imagined it? The splitting headache that immediately followed suggested otherwise. Over the next week, she discovered that objects would occasionally move when she concentrated on them, especially when she was experiencing the strongest side effects from the treatment. A book would slide across a table. A door would close without being touched. Each incident left her exhausted and frightened, wondering if the toxins were affecting her brain. During their 9th treatment session, a tray of medical instruments crashed to the floor when a particularly painful wave of burning sensations coursed through her body. The medical staff attributed it to a careless technician, but Mr. Shen's eyes narrowed as he watched Xiaoqi's panicked expression. That evening, he appeared at her door unannounced, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of soup. "You missed dinner," he said simply, setting the tray beside her bed. "The chef said this might help settle your stomach." Xiaoi looked at him with surprise. This was their first interaction outside of treatments and occasional meals since the wedding. "Thank you, but I'm fine," she lied, even as her hands trembled against the blanket. "You're not fine," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "The doctors are concerned about your rapid decline. At this rate, the treatment might—" He stopped, seeming reluctant to continue. "Might what?" she pressed. "It might kill you before it saves me," he finished, his eyes meeting hers directly. "I've reviewed your latest test results. Your body isn't processing the toxins quickly enough." Fear flickered through her, not for herself, but for her father. If she couldn't complete the treatment, what would happen to the financial arrangements? Would Mr. Shen still honor their agreement if she failed to fulfill her part? The soup bowl trembled on the tray, sliding half an inch to the left. Mr. Shen's gaze snapped to it, then back to her face. "How long has this been happening?" he asked quietly. Xiaoi's first instinct was to deny everything, but exhaustion overwhelmed her usual caution. "Since the 3rd treatment. I don't know what's happening to me. It's the cellular interaction," he said, surprising her with his lack of shock. "The doctors theorized that your unique blood composition might produce unexpected effects when it absorbs certain toxins. They just didn't predict this. I'm worried it might affect—" She stopped herself, unwilling to voice the new fear that had been growing alongside her strange abilities. "Affect what?" Mr. Shen prompted. She hesitated. "The doctors confirmed yesterday that I'm pregnant, about 6 weeks along." The silence that followed felt weighted with implications neither of them had considered when signing their business-like marriage contract, their one night together. A clinical consummation to satisfy legal requirements had resulted in a completely unplanned complication. Mr. Shen's expression shifted through shock, calculation, and something that might have been concern before settling into determination. "We need to pause the treatments," he said finally, "but your condition has improved enough that I can afford a temporary halt while we reassess," he cut in. "The risk to you, and the—" He seemed unable to say the word baby, settling instead on situation, "is too great to continue without modification." The next morning, Mr. Shen called an emergency meeting with the medical team. Xiaoi watched with growing confusion as he detailed her symptoms, including the telekinetic incidents, and demanded a complete re-evaluation of the treatment protocol. "Sir, pausing now could reverse your progress," the lead physician warned. The toxins we've removed could regenerate. Your survival rate would drop significantly. Find another way, Mr. Shen replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. I won't continue a treatment that's killing her to save me. Xiaoi stared at him, trying to reconcile this version of Mr. Shen with the cold businessman who had proposed their arrangement. The man who now insisted on protecting her health at the risk of his own seemed like a stranger. As the medical team dispersed to develop alternatives, Mr. Shen turned to find Xiaoi watching him with undisguised confusion. She asked simply. He considered her for a long moment before answering. Because you've suffered enough for my benefit, and because our contract was for a business arrangement, not a sacrifice. Before she could respond, his assistant burst into the room, face tense with barely contained alarm. Sir, Ms. Lu Jiajiao has arrived with your mother. They're insisting on seeing you immediately. Mr. Shen's expression hardened. Tell them, unavailable. They say it's urgent, regarding your marriage and certain information they've discovered about Mrs. Shen. The look Mr. Shen gave his assistant carried a warning. Put them in the East Wing sitting room. I'll be there shortly. When the assistant left, he turned back to Xiaoi. This conversation isn't finished. Xiaoi nodded, still processing the revelation that Mr. Shen valued her well-being enough to risk his own recovery. As he walked away, she felt a strange connection between them shifting into something neither of them had anticipated when they signed their contract. That strange connection forming between Xiaoi and Mr. Shen was about to face its first real test with the arrival of two women who had already decided her fate. The mansion's peaceful atmosphere shattered one crisp morning when the double doors of the grand foyer swung open, announcing visitors whose smiles masked intentions sharp as daggers. Lu Jiajiao entered first, her designer heels clicking against marble, with the confidence of someone who had spent years imagining herself as the mansion's mistress. Behind her walked Mrs. Shen Sr., carrying herself with the precision of a general inspecting enemy territory, her discerning eyes missing nothing as she surveyed what she considered her son's greatest mistake. So this is the miracle cure? Mrs. Shen said, her voice honey-sweet, while her eyes remained winter-cold, as they assessed Xiaoi from head to toe. The older woman's immaculate appearance, every silver hair perfectly placed, her posture aristocratic, despite her 70 years, made Xiaoi painfully aware of her own simplicity. How interesting that my son failed to mention your background before the wedding announcement reached me. Lu Jiajiao stepped forward, embracing Xiaoi with practiced warmth that never reached her eyes. We've heard so much about you, she lied, her perfume cloud engulfing Xiaoi like a toxic fog. 15 years I've known the Shen family, and I've never seen such a whirlwind romance. The emphasis on whirlwind transformed the word into an accusation. Within hours of their arrival, the mansion's atmosphere transformed. What had been Xiaoqi's tentative sanctuary became contested territory, where every room held potential confrontation. At dinner that evening, Lu Xiaoqi reminisced about her history with Mr. Shen, each childhood anecdote a reminder, see, things never change. You still hate asking for directions. Mrs. Shen nodded approvingly at these exchanges, while directing surgical strikes at Xiaoi. Have you ever sailed, dear? No? Perhaps someday you'll learn the basics, though I suppose the open water might be frightening for someone not raised with such experiences. The social battleground extended beyond mealtimes. Lu Xiaoqia helpfully corrected Xiaoqia's table etiquette in front of guests. Mrs. Shen questioned her about family lineage when meeting business associates, ensuring everyone understood Xiaoi came from nothing. These tactics, what researchers identify as social manipulation, were designed to isolate Xiaoi and diminish her standing within the household. 3 days after their arrival, Xiaoi experienced the first direct attack. A special tea arrived in her room. A family recipe for women's health, explained the unfamiliar servant who delivered it. Minutes after drinking it, Xiaoi collapsed in violent spasms, barely managing to call for help before losing consciousness. The medical team discovered traces of a rare herb that, while harmless to most, reacted catastrophically with her unique blood composition. "You must have misunderstood the ingredients," Mrs. Shen suggested when confronted, concern painted perfectly across her features. "Many traditional remedies can be misinterpreted. Perhaps your unusual condition makes you sensitive to common herbs." When Xiaoi tried explaining her suspicions to Mr. Shen, his response left her cold. "You're still adjusting to this lifestyle," he said dismissively, not looking up from his tablet. "Mother has served that tea to female guests for decades. Your treatments are making you paranoid." The doctors warned, emotional instability might be a side effect. This dismissal, what psychologists recognize as gaslighting, left Xiaoi questioning her own judgment. Had she imagined the calculated malice behind Mrs. Shen's smile? Was Lu Jiajiao's constant undermining merely friendly teasing she was too sensitive to accept? The doubt crept into her thoughts like poison, exactly as intended. Meanwhile, the ongoing medical treatments left Xiaoi physically vulnerable. Each session drained her strength, as toxins transferred from Mr. Shen's body to hers. Some mornings she could barely stand, making her an increasingly easy target. Lu Qiajia began accompanying her to treatment sessions, ostensibly out of concern, but actually gathering information about her weaknesses. "It's fascinating how your condition works," Lu Qiajia commented one afternoon, watching Xiaoi struggle to stand after a particularly difficult treatment. "To think something so strange could be useful. What will happen when the treatments end, I wonder? When your purpose is fulfilled?" Despite her weakened state, Xiaoi's intuition sharpened. She began noticing patterns. Servants, who appeared only when Mrs. Shen visited her wing. Items in her room subtly rearranged. Medication that looked slightly different than the day before. Small inconsistencies that together formed a disturbing picture. Something wasn't right, and she needed proof. Xiaoi started keeping a journal, documenting every suspicious interaction and physical symptom. She secretly preserved samples of food and medicine that seemed altered. When a new nurse joined her treatment team, one who arrived with glowing recommendations but whose credentials Xiaoi couldn't verify, she became especially vigilant. Her breakthrough came while reviewing security footage she'd requested from the East Wing, where her medications were stored. The new nurse clearly entered the pharmaceutical storage at 2:17 a.m., replacing Xiaoi's prepared treatment with a different solution. The evidence was undeniable. Someone was deliberately tampering with her medication, endangering not only her recovery, but Mr. Shen's as well. Before she could present this evidence, disaster struck. While descending the mansion's grand staircase for an important dinner with Mr. Shen's business associates, Xiaoi felt the marble step beneath her suddenly shift. As she began to fall forward toward the stone floor 20 feet below, time seemed to slow. The primal fear of falling triggered something within her, the same telekinetic ability that had manifested during her treatment. With a surge of desperate focus, Xiaoi instinctively reached out, not with her hands, but with her mind. The crystal chandelier above the foyer trembled. Then several of its pendants detached and flew toward her with impossible speed. They arranged themselves beneath her falling body, creating momentary resistance that slowed her descent just enough that, when she hit the floor, the impact bruised rather than broke. Mr. Shen witnessed this impossible event from the bottom of the stairs. The security footage later revealed Lu Qiaqiao at the top of the staircase, moments before, adjusting something on the steps Xiaoi would use. The accident had been meticulously planned, yet no one had accounted for Xiaoi's developing abilities. "You are right," Mr. Shen admitted that night, as doctors examined her injuries. The cold dismissal was gone from his voice, replaced by something new, a mixture of concern and respect. "Someone in this house wants you gone, and I refuse to see it." Staring at the security footage playing on the tablet between them, Xiaoi watched Lu Qiajiao's calculated movements as she sabotaged the stair. "They're not just targeting me," she said quietly. "By harming me, they're endangering your treatment too. This isn't just personal, it's about control." Mr. Shen nodded grimly. "My mother has always believed she knows what's best for me, and Xiaoi Qiangjia has expected to be my wife since we were teenagers. Your presence threatens everything they've planned." He met her eyes directly. "We need to protect each other now. I can't recover without you, and you can't survive here without my protection." Their agreement to protect each other created a fragile beginning. But Xiaoi quickly realized that survival in the Shen mansion would require more than just Mr. Shen's word. Behind the polished marble and crystal chandeliers existed an invisible network of people who had witnessed generations of Shen family secrets, people society had trained her to overlook, but who might become her most valuable allies. The morning after their pact, Xiaoi found herself lingering in the kitchen after breakfast. The head chef, Ming, paused his meticulous knife work and studied her with curious eyes. "Mrs. Shen, can I help you with something?" he asked, his formal tone softening when he noticed her uneasy glance toward the doorway. "I'm wondering," she began, hesitantly, "if you've worked here long enough to know the household's routines. Who prepares the special tea that's delivered to my room?" Ming's knife stilled completely. He glanced at the other kitchen staff, who suddenly found reasons to busy themselves elsewhere. When they were alone, he spoke in a lowered voice. "That tea comes directly from Mrs. Shen's personal attendant. It bypasses our kitchen entirely." His eyes met hers with unexpected directness, and it only started after your arrival. This simple conversation opened a door Xiaoi hadn't anticipated. Within days, she discovered that the mansion staff, the invisible hands that kept the household running, noticed everything. The housekeepers knew which rooms Lu Jiajio frequented when she thought no one was watching. The gardeners had seen Mrs. Shen Sr. collecting herbs from a private garden no one else was permitted to tend. The security guards tracked every unusual visitor. Wang Tietian's assistant proved especially valuable. One afternoon, as he organized documents in Mr. Shen's study, while Xiaoi waited for her husband, he spoke without looking up. "Mrs. Shen, you should know that Ms. Lu has been accessing your treatment schedules. She's also been inquiring about the specific details of your blood condition with the medical team." Xiaoi felt her breath catch. "Why are you telling me this?" Wang Teju finally looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "I've worked for Mr. Shen for 12 years. In that time, I've never seen him recover from anything, physically or emotionally, until you arrive." He straightened a stack of papers with methodical precision. "Some people in this house would prefer to see the old status quo restored, with Miss Rislu taking her rightful place once you've served your purpose." The mansion's driver, an older man named Shen, who rarely spoke, began taking unexpected detours when driving Xiaoi, pointing out security cameras that covered the property and identifying blind spots she should avoid. The maid, who cleaned her rooms, showed her hidden passages used by staff to move unseen throughout the massive house, just in case you need to move quickly without being noticed. These unexpected allies didn't just help Xiaoi avoid physical dangers. They began teaching her the unwritten social codes that governed elite circles. Wang Tiezhi coached her on the complicated web of business relationships Mr. Shen navigated, explaining which associates were genuine and which were manipulative opportunists. The household social secretary tutored her on proper etiquette for upcoming events, transforming rules that once seemed arbitrary into strategic tools for navigating treacherous social waters. "Power in high society isn't just about money," the secretary explained, while helping Xiaoi prepare for an upcoming charity gala. "It's about knowing things others don't, speaking in codes others can't crack, and making the right people feel important while keeping dangerous ones at a distance." Xiaoi absorbed these lessons with the same determination she'd once applied to managing multiple jobs. Her background, which Lu Qiajiao and Mrs. Shen viewed as her greatest weakness, became her unexpected strength. The staff, accustomed to being treated as furniture by the elite visitors who frequented the mansion, found in Xiaoi someone who looked them in the eye, remembered their names, and valued their insights. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala became the testing ground for Xiaoi's evolving skills. As she entered the grand ballroom on Mr. Shen's arm, she felt the weight of evaluating gazes. The whispers followed them. Speculation about the mysterious illness, the sudden marriage, the unsuitable bride. Lu Xiaojiao glided through the crowd in a designer gown, leaving a trail of sympathetic nods directed at Mr. Shen's behind her. When Lu Xiao cornered Xiaoqi near the champagne fountain, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That dress is certainly interesting," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "So brave of you to choose something so unique, when you're still learning how things work in our world." 6 weeks earlier, Jiaqi would have flushed with embarrassment and retreated. Tonight she recalled Wang Tieju's advice about handling public confrontations. She smiled warmly and responded in a clear, measured voice. "Thank you for noticing." Mr. Shen selected it personally. She took a deliberate sip of water before adding, "He's developing quite an eye for what suits me, don't you think?" The subtle emphasis on Mr. Shen's personal interest in her appearance wasn't lost on the listening guests. Lu Jiaqiao's smile tightened as several influential women nearby gave Xiaoqi appraising looks. By referring to her husband as Mr. Shen, rather than using his first name, Xiaoqi had signaled both respect and intimacy, a social nuance she'd learned from the secretary. Later that evening, Mr. Shen found her on the terrace. "I heard about your exchange with Jia Qiao," he said, studying her with new interest. "I'm still learning," Xiaoqi admitted, "but I'm beginning to understand that survival here requires more than just avoiding poisoned tea." Something shifted in Mr. Shen's expression, a new awareness, perhaps respect. "You're adapting faster than I expected." After a pause, he added, "Who's been helping you?" "Wang Teju, among others," she replied. "It seems your staff notices more than anyone gives them credit for." Mr. Shen nodded thoughtfully. "A blind spot I've been guilty of myself." He hesitated before continuing. "Tomorrow morning let's review the security footage from the night before your staircase incident. There may be details I miss." This marked the beginning of their true collaboration. Each evening, they gathered in his study, comparing notes and analyzing patterns. Xiaoqi brought insights gleaned from the staff networks she'd cultivated, while Mr. Shen contributed his deep understanding of the family dynamics and business pressures at play. The wall of his study gradually transformed into an investigation board, mapping connections and suspicious incidents. As they worked side by side, something unexpected developed between them, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect. Mr. Shen began to value Xiaoqi's intuitive understanding of people's motivations, born from years of observing customers at her various jobs. She, in turn, came to appreciate his strategic mind and the quiet determination that had built his empire. One night, after they'd identified a pattern leaking Lu Xiaoqiao's visits with subsequent accidents, Mr. Shen leaned back in his chair and regarded Xiaoqi with genuine curiosity. "You could have chosen the easier path, playing the naive victim, allowing me to handle everything. Why put yourself at risk by activating investigating?" Xiaoqi considered her answer carefully. "Because I've spent my entire life being underestimated. I refuse to be a passive participant in my own fate any longer." A smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed Mr. Shen's face. "I think I'm beginning to understand why your blood is so remarkable," he said quietly. "It reflects what's inside you." That night's warmth evaporated by dawn. Option 3 holds the most potential for this dramatic turn of events. The smile on Mr. Shen's face vanished before sunrise. While his words about Xiaoqi's remarkable blood had created a moment of genuine connection between them, his body was already in rebellion. As morning light filtered through the mansion's windows, chaos erupted. The medical team rushed through hallways, equipment clattering against the marble floors. Xiaoqi awakened to urgent voices outside her door. And before she could fully process what was happening, the chief physician stood in her doorway, his face gray with concern. "It's Mr. Shen," he said, his clinical detachment slipping. "His body is rejecting the previous treatments at an accelerated rate. We need to make decisions immediately." In the medical wing, monitors beeped ominously around Mr. Shen. His skin had taken on a waxy pallor, making yesterday's improvements seem like a cruel illusion. The team of specialists spoke in hushed, urgent tones, occasionally glancing at Xiaoi with expressions that ranged from pity to calculation. She stood frozen at the foot of his bed, watching his labored breathing, the reality of their situation crystallizing with brutal clarity. "We need to initiate the final phase of treatment now," the chief physician explained, addressing both of them. "But there's something you both need to understand." He paused, weighing his words carefully. The concentration of toxins that would transfer to Xiaoi's system in this accelerated process would be nearly triple what we've administered previously. The risk to her is substantial. Mr. Shen's eyes snapped open at this, suddenly alert, despite his condition. "What kind of risk?" His voice was weak, but commanding. The doctor's clinical facade cracked slightly. "Organ failure. Systemic collapse. There's a significant possibility that her body simply couldn't process that level of toxicity." "Then we stop the treatment," Mr. Shen said without hesitation. "If we stop now," another specialist interjected, "your prognosis is extremely poor. The toxins have concentrated in your major organs. Without intervention, they'll cause catastrophic failure within days, perhaps hours." The room fell silent as the impossible equation settled between them. His life or hers? Xiaoi's mind raced through contradictory thoughts. She thought of her father, finally receiving the care he needed. She thought of the contract that bound her to this man. But mostly, she thought of the genuine smile that had transformed Mr. Shen's face the previous evening. Evidence that beneath his calculated exterior existed a person worth saving. "Prepare the treatment," Mr. Shen's voice cut through her thoughts, surprising everyone. "But not for me. Develop a protocol to remove the toxins already in Ms. Xiaoi's system. We're ending this arrangement." The medical team exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued with him. As they filtered out to prepare, Xiaoi approached his bedside, conflicting emotions battling within her. "You can't make this decision without me," she said quietly. "This affects both of us." He looked at her with eyes that held unexpected depth. "I've built my empire by calculating risks and benefits. This equation is simple. Your life isn't worth the extension of mine." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Mrs. Shen and Lu Jia swept into the room like storm clouds, having clearly overheard the conversation from outside. "This is absurd," Mrs. Shen declared, her voice cutting through the room's tension. "The girl agreed to this treatment. She signed a contract and has been compensated beyond her wildest dreams." Lu Jia moved closer to Mr. Shen's bed, her concern appearing genuine, though her words were precisely aimed. "You can't make such decisions in your condition. You're not thinking clearly." Shen turned to Xiaoi, her expression hardening. "If you refuse to continue the treatment now, you'll prove what we've suspected all along, that you care only for the money and position you've gained, not for my son's life." The manipulation was transparent, but effective, striking at Xiaoi's deepest insecurities. Mr. Shen struggled to sit up, his anger momentarily strengthening him. "Enough," he commanded. "Leave us, both of you." When they reluctantly departed, silence settled between Xiaoi and Mr. Shen. For several minutes, neither spoke, the beeping monitors the only sound in the room. "They're wrong about you," he finally said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I can see that now." Xiaoi pulled a chair closer to his bed. "When I came to your company that day, I was desperate. I would have done anything to save my father." She met his gaze directly. "But that's not why I'm here now." "Are you here?" he asked, the question holding more weight than the simple words suggested. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "Our arrangement started as a transaction, but something has changed. I'm not continuing the treatment because of our contract or because of what your mother said. I'm doing it because I want to." His expression shifted, surprise giving way to something more complex. "I won't allow it. The risk is too great." "It's not your decision to make," she countered. "For once, I'm not being passive in my own fate. This is my choice." They talked for hours, truly conversing for the first time since they'd met. As medical staff occasionally checked in, Xiaoi and Mr. Shen discussed their childhoods, their dreams, and the strange path that had brought them together. He spoke of the loneliness at the top of his empire, how his illness had forced him to confront the emptiness of success without connection. She described growing up with her condition, the isolation of keeping such a significant secret. "If I don't survive this treatment," she said at one point, "promise you'll still provide for my father." He reached for her hand, the gesture startling them both. "If you don't survive, none of this will have mattered anyway." Morning had turned to afternoon, and afternoon to evening when the medical team returned. They explained the modified protocol they'd developed to maximize Mr. Shen's chances while minimizing risk to Xiaoi, though the danger remained significant. "We need your final decision," the chief physician said. Xiaoi stood, her resolve firm despite her fear. "I'm ready." Mr. Shen made one final attempt to dissuade her, but the determination in her eyes, two words that acknowledged what had developed between them, something neither had anticipated when signing their contracts. The preparation for the treatment was solemn and methodical. As the medical team inserted IVs and attached monitors, Xiaoi felt strangely calm. Lu Qiaqiao and Mrs. Shen watched from the doorway, their expressions unreadable. Whatever their motivations, even they seemed affected by the gravity of the moment. As Xiaoi was wheeled into the treatment room, Mr. Shen's bed positioned beside hers, their eyes met one final time before the procedure began. No words were necessary. The machines hummed to life, beginning the process that would either save them both or claim at least one life. The fluid flowing between them glowed with that distinctive blue luminescence, beautiful despite its deadly potential. The blue glow gradually faded from the treatment room, but what remained between them was something even more remarkable, a connection neither had anticipated. For weeks after the final procedure, Xiaoi and Mr. Shen recovered in adjacent rooms of the mansion's east wing, their bodies healing from an ordeal that had nearly claimed both their lives. The medical staff monitored them constantly, checking vital signs and running frequent tests, but they were measuring only physical recovery. Something deeper was healing between them, something no medical scan could detect. Recovery brought unfamiliar quiet after months of urgent treatments and life-threatening complications. Their days, once structured around medical necessities, now stretched before them, empty of purpose. The contract that had bound them together, a desperate arrangement to save a dying man, had fulfilled its primary function. Both were now adrift in an unexpected aftermath, where survival was no longer the only goal. One evening, 3 weeks after the final treatment, Mr. Shen appeared at Xiaoi's door, carrying a small, worn book. "I found this in the library," he said, his voice lacking its former authority. "You mentioned you enjoyed poetry as a child." The book was a collection of ancient verses, dog-eared and annotated in faded ink. A simple gesture, remembering something she had mentioned in passing during their long pre-treatment conversation, struck Xiaoyu more deeply than any of the expensive gifts that had appeared in her room since their marriage. "My mother used to read these to me," she said, running her fingers over the cracked spine. Mr. Shen lingered, and for the first time, they talked without the shadow of illness between them. The conversation lasted until midnight, winding through childhood memories, favorite foods, and dreams deferred. As Xiaoi described the small garden she had maintained on her apartment windowsill, Mr. Shen listened with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. The next morning, when she opened her curtains, she found gardeners installing raised beds outside her window. Small moments like these accumulated slowly, building a foundation neither had expected Over dinner, they discovered a shared love for old black and white films. During a power outage, they laughed together as they fumbled through the mansion with candles, accidentally terrifying a housemaid when they appeared around a corner, like ghostly apparitions. I realized, "I don't know what your favorite color is," Mr. Shen said one afternoon, as they walked through the gardens, his strength visibly returning with each passing day. The man beside her bore little resemblance to the dying billionaire who had proposed a clinical arrangement months earlier. His face had filled out, color returned to his skin, and his eyes held a vibrancy that transcended mere physical recovery. "Green," Xiaoi replied, surprised by the simplicity of the question. "Like the moss that grew on the stones behind our apartment." When she returned to her room that evening, she found a small moss garden in a handcrafted stone container on her nightstand. No note, no explanation needed. Mr. Shen was learning her language of simplicity, finding beauty in the modest things she valued, rather than overwhelming her with extravagance. The staff noticed the change in their employer. The man who had built an empire through ruthless efficiency and unwavering focus now paused to ask about their families. He delayed meetings to accompany Xiaoi on visits to her father. When she expressed interest in his business, he began inviting her to selected meetings not as a decorative spouse, but as someone whose opinion he valued. "You have an unusual perspective," he told her after she offered an insight about customer needs that his executives had overlooked. "You see what we miss because we're too close to it." As they began to discover each other, Xiaoi found herself watching Mr. Shen when he didn't notice, observing him with his assistant, with the gardener, with the board members who had once intimidated her. She recognized that she was looking for inconsistencies, waiting for the mask to slip and reveal the cold businessman who had proposed a marriage contract. Yet with each passing day, that man seemed more distant, replaced by someone capable of genuine care. One evening, Xiaoi found Mr. Shen waiting for her at dinner, with an unusual request. "Would you accompany me to dinner tomorrow?" "Not here, at a restaurant in the city. We've had dinner together every night this week," she replied, confused. This would be different. A flash of nervousness crossed his face, an expression she had never seen before. "I thought perhaps I could take you on a proper date." The words hung between them, transforming their relationship yet again. This wasn't part of their arrangement, wasn't covered in any contract clause. This was choice, rather than necessity. Xiaoi felt herself at another crossroads, not unlike the moment she had decided to reveal her secret to save her father. But this decision wasn't driven by desperation. It was an invitation to possibility. "I would like that," she finally said. Thus began a strange reverse courtship, a husband wooing his wife as if they were just beginning. Mr. Shen took her to small, intimate restaurants, rather than the ostentatious establishments his peers frequented. He listened more than he spoke. He discovered her love of astronomy and arranged a private viewing at the observatory. When she mentioned missing the simple pleasure of street food, he surprised her with a night market adventure where they blended anonymously with the crowds, eating from paper containers while perched on plastic stools. "I never got to do this," he confessed, savoring a skewer of grilled meat. "By the time I could afford anything, I was too concerned with appearances to enjoy something so simple." Xiaoi watched him carefully, still harboring residual caution. "Why are you doing all this? Our arrangement has been fulfilled. You're well again." He considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because I want to know who you are when you're not saving my life. And perhaps I want to discover who I am when I'm not dying." As weeks became months, Xiaoi allowed herself to slowly lower the walls she had built around her heart. The hesitation that had protected her began to feel like an unnecessary barrier. They were building something real, from the most artificial of beginnings, a relationship founded on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than medical necessity. "I was thinking," Mr. Shen said one evening, as they sat together in the garden, "that perhaps we might renew our vows." Xiaoi turned to him, surprised. We've already had a wedding. We had a contract signing, he corrected gently. I'm suggesting a ceremony that reflects what we feel, not what we needed. The proposal hung between them, an acknowledgement that their relationship had transformed into something neither had anticipated. Xiaoi felt the weight of this choice, understanding that this time she would be choosing him rather than her father's medical care. As she considered her answer, Xiaoi realized she was pressing her hand against her abdomen, a subconscious gesture that had become frequent in recent weeks. The next morning, after feeling lightheaded during breakfast, she visited the mansion's medical wing. The doctor's confirmation turned her world upside down once more. The pregnancy a new life created between them added yet another dimension to their evolving bond. When she told Mr. Shen that evening, his reaction was nothing like she expected. The usually composed businessman stood frozen, then sat down abruptly. "A child," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our child." He reached for her hand with a gentleness that told her everything she needed to know about their future. The gentle pressure of Mr. Shen's hand against Xiaoi's felt different now. No longer a gesture between reluctant partners bound by medical necessity, but a shield formed to protect the miracle growing within her. As her pregnancy progressed, the mansion that had once felt like a gilded cage transformed into a fortress they desperately needed to defend. Xiaoi's unique condition, already complicated by the residual toxins from Mr. Shen's treatments, created unprecedented medical challenges that kept their team of specialists working around the clock. "Something's happening," Xiaoi whispered one morning, her eyes wide with alarm, as she stared at the breakfast tray, hovering 6 inches above her lap. Her telekinetic abilities, once a curious side effect, had intensified dramatically with each passing week of pregnancy. The medical team theorized that the developing baby was somehow amplifying her abilities, but whether this signaled danger or protection remained unclear. Mr. Shen's face betrayed no fear as he gently guided the tray back to solid ground. "We'll adapt," he said, with newfound tenderness, "just like we've done with everything else." What he didn't voice was his growing concern that these expanding abilities might be drawing too much energy from Xiaoi's already taxed system, energy their child needed to develop safely. Meanwhile, in another wing of the mansion, Lu Qiajia received the news of Xiaoi's pregnancy with a stillness that chilled her personal assistant. The woman who had orchestrated accidents and poisoning attempts now sat motionless, her expression unreadable, as she processed the reality that Mr. Shen was forever beyond her reach. "A child," she finally whispered, her voice unnaturally calm. How convenient for her. What followed was not the explosive rage her staff anticipated, but something far more dangerous, a calculated, methodical approach to elimination. Lu Qiajia began researching substances that would specifically target a developing fetus without raising suspicion. Substances that would appear to be natural complications of Xiaoi's unusual condition. The first warning came when Xiaoi woke with inexplicable cramping 3 weeks into her second trimester. The medical team discovered trace amounts of acacia extract in her evening tea, a compound known to induce miscarriage, but easily mistaken for a natural complication in high-risk pregnancy. The source remained elusive until Wang Tiaqia's network of household allies revealed that Lu Qiajiao had been seen replacing the mansion's standard incense with a special blend she claimed would purify the air for the baby. "I seem to have the ability to telekinetically," Xiaoi explained to her doctor after unconsciously deflecting a falling vase that would have shattered near her victim. The expanding abilities both frightened and fascinated her, especially when she realized they often activated automatically when threats approached. As if her body had developed an advanced warning system to protect the child within. The household became an invisible battlefield where Xiaoi could trust almost no one. Food was prepared under the watchful eyes of loyal staff members. Her medications were tested repeatedly before administration. Even the air in her rooms was filtered through systems checked hourly by security personnel. Monsieur Shen had personally vetted. The tension culminated when security cameras captured Lu Jiajiao entering the East Wing medical facility at midnight, replacing Xiaoi's prenatal supplements with identical-looking capsules. Laboratory analysis revealed they contained compounds that would have caused irreversible damage to the developing baby's nervous system. A discovery that finally gave Mr. Shen the evidence he needed to confront not just Lu Jiajiao, but the person who had granted her unrestricted access to the mansion, his mother. The confrontation took place in Mr. Shen's study, a room that had witnessed countless business negotiations, but never a reckoning of this magnitude. His mother sat rigidly in her chair, her aristocratic features set in stone, as her son presented the evidence of her complicity. "Did you truly believe I would forgive this?" Mr. Shen asked, his voice dangerously quiet as he placed the toxicology reports on the desk between them. "Did you think I would choose family tradition over my wife and child? The goal has bewitched you with her abnormal blood and convenient pregnancy," his mother replied coldly. "The Lu family has been aligned with ours for generations. This match was decided years ago. From today, the Shen family terminated all cooperation with the Lu family," Mr. Shen declared, the finality in his voice marking the severance of ties that went back decades. "My security team will escort you to the guest house until arrangements can be made for your permanent residence elsewhere. Your access to this house and my family is revoked, effective immediately." His mother's face betrayed a flicker of shock. She had never imagined her son capable of such decisive action against her. In that moment, Mr. Shen made his choice clear. The family he was building with Xiaoi now took precedence over the dynasty that had raised him. But Lu Jiajiao was not finished. Cornered animals are most dangerous, and having lost everything, her planned marriage, her social position, and now her powerful allies, she made one desperate final move. Bribing a member of the household staff, she gained access to Xiaoi's private quarters during an afternoon when Mr. Shen was attending an emergency board meeting. Xiaoi, resting in her bedroom, sensed the intrusion seconds before the door swung open. Lu Jiajiao stood in the doorway, no longer maintaining any pretense of civility, a syringe clutched in her trembling hand. "I'm also going to kill the little bastard in his belly," Lu Jiajian hissed, advancing toward the bed, where Xiaoi lay vulnerable. "You took everything from me, everything that should have been mine." What happened next would later be described by the security team who reviewed the footage as physically impossible. As Lu Xiaoqiao lunged forward, Xiaoi's eyes flashed with an electric blue light, the same luminescence that had once glowed in her blood. Every object in the room simultaneously lifted 6 inches off the ground, suspended in perfect stillness for 3 seconds, before gently returning to their place. Every object except Lu Jiajiao, who remained frozen in midair, her limbs immobilized by an invisible force. When Mr. Shen burst into the room moments later, alerted by the security system's panic protocol, he found Lu Jiajiao pinned against the wall, the syringe she'd carried analyzed by security and found to contain a lethal concentration of potassium chloride, untraceable in autopsy and commonly used to induce cardiac arrest. "She wanted to make it look like a natural complication," Xiaoi explained later, her hand protectively covering her growing stomach. "She knew exactly how to make it appear that my condition simply couldn't sustain a pregnancy." The scandal that followed was handled with the precision and discretion that had built the Shenya Empire. Lu Xiaojiao faced criminal charges for attempted murder, while Mrs. Shen Sr. retreated to the family's estate in the countryside. Her influence within the company quietly dismantled through a series of strategic boardroom maneuvers. For Xiaoi and Mr. Shen, the ordeal transformed them from reluctant partners into unbreakable allies. The medical team continued monitoring Xiaoi's expanding abilities, developing protocols to help her maintain control while ensuring the baby received the energy needed to develop properly. To everyone's relief, ultrasounds showed a perfectly developing child, one that appeared to carry both parents' strength and resilience. "We've created something remarkable," Mr. Shen said one evening as they reviewed the latest scans, his hand entwined with Xiaoi. Not just a child, but a future neither of us could have imagined. A future neither could have imagined arrived on a stormy spring night, when their daughter entered the world with a crescent moon birthmark that faintly illuminated in water. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, but their expressions betrayed their awe as the newborn's skin occasionally pulsed with a soft blue luminescence when the nurse wiped her clean. "She's beautiful," Mr. Shen whispered, cradling his daughter with a gentleness that would have seemed impossible to those who knew him only as the ruthless CEO from a year ago. The man who once evaluated everything, including his marriage, through the cold lens of business advantage, now gazed at his child with unguarded wonder. His transformation wasn't sudden, but had unfolded gradually through Xiaoi's illness, recovery, and pregnancy. The corporate titan who had built empires now spent hours researching the safest cribs and reading parenting books with the same intensity he once reserved for quarterly reports. Watching him with their daughter, Xiaoi reflected on her own journey. The frightened young woman who had entered the Shen Corporation building prepared to sell her secret to save her father, now stood as the confident co-founder of the Luminous Blood Research Foundation. Her voice, once hesitant when addressing household staff, now commanded boardrooms where scientists and medical professionals presented their findings. The foundation had already identified 17 other individuals worldwide with variations of their daughter's condition and was funding promising research into applications beyond what had saved Mr. Shen. "What should we name her?" Xiaoi asked, touching the crescent birthmark on their daughter's wrist. The question carried weight beyond tradition. It would be the first step in defining how their daughter would view herself and her unique condition. Mr. Shen considered for a moment before suggesting Minghua. The name combined brightness with transformation, acknowledging both her luminous inheritance and the change she represented for their family. As their daughter grew stronger, so did the question that had lingered since they first saw the telltale glow beneath her newborn skin. How would they raise a child with the same condition that had defined Xiaoi's life through secrecy and fear? The question crystallized one evening as they watched Minghua sleeping peacefully in her crib, the monitors around her displaying normal vital signs despite her extraordinary biology. "My father believed he was protecting me by teaching me to hide," Xiaoi said, breaking the silence. "Every time I accidentally exposed my condition, I saw terror in his eyes, not for himself, but for what might happen to me if the wrong people discovered my secret." Mr. Shen nodded, understanding the complexity of the choice before them. And he was right to be afraid, in his context. But our context is different. They spent weeks deliberating their daughter's future. Xiaoi's instinct, born from years of conditioning, initially leaned toward caution and discretion. Mr. Shen, having witnessed both the danger and the extraordinary potential of his wife's condition, advocated for a middle path, protected knowledge rather than shameful secrecy. Their discussions eventually led to action. While Minghua was still too young to understand her difference, her parents began laying groundwork for a future where her unique blood would be a source of strength and purpose, rather than shame. The foundation they had established expanded its mission to include educational resources for families affected by rare blood conditions, creating a community where Minghua would never feel as isolated as her mother had. Xiaoi's father watched with proud tears as his daughter, radiant in a simple gown that reflected her authentic style rather than ostentatious wealth, exchanged vows with the man who had once seen her only as a medical solution. "When I first met you," Mr. Shen said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I saw you as the answer to my survival. I never imagined you would become essential to my happiness." His words, unscripted and heartfelt, reflected the journey from their transactional beginning to genuine partnership. Xiaoi's vows acknowledged their unusual path. "We began with signatures on paper, but we continue with promises written on our hearts. You've shown me that what made me different wasn't a curse to hide, but a gift to share. and together we'll show our daughter the same truth." As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, Minghua cooed in her grandfather's arms, a tiny witness to the culmination of an extraordinary transformation. The gathered guests, including the loyal staff members who had become allies during Xiaoi's darkest days in the mansion, applauded the union that now existed not on paper, but in reality. The following week, the board of the Luminous Blood Research Foundation met to discuss the first major clinical trial using synthesized compounds derived from Xiaoi's blood analysis. Mr. Shen, who had redistributed his corporate responsibilities to focus on the foundation, presented the promising preliminary results. "We've identified 3 distinct properties in the luminescent cells that could revolutionize how we treat toxin-based illnesses," he explained, gesturing to the molecular diagrams displayed on the screen. "The grants we've secured will fund trials in 5 major research hospitals." Xiaoi, seated at the opposite end of the table, with Minghua sleeping against her chest in a carrier, added, "What once saved one life could potentially save thousands. We've already received inquiries from families dealing with industrial poisoning cases, similar to what affected my husband." After the meeting, they walked through the Foundation's new research facility, which occupied what had once been the east wing of the Shen mansion. The space that had witnessed Xiaoi's suffering during the treatments now housed state-of-the-art laboratories, where scientists worked to unlock the mysteries of luminescent blood. "Do you think she'll want to be part of this someday?" Xiaoi asked, looking down at their sleeping daughter. Mr. Shen considered the question with the thoughtfulness that had become characteristic of his parenting style. "We'll show her all possibilities and let her choose her own path. Whether she wants to lead the foundation or pursue something entirely different, what matters is that she never feels her condition limits her choices." Later that evening, as they prepared Minghua for bed, they discussed the educational trust they were establishing, not just for their daughter, but for all children identified with the luminescent blood condition. The program would ensure these children received support while maintaining their privacy, creating a protected space for them to grow and learn about their unique biology. "We're building something that will last beyond us," Mr. Shen said, watching as Xiaoi gently lowered Mingwei into her crib. The nursery walls were painted with constellations that glowed softly in the dark, a reminder that some of the most beautiful things in the universe shine only when everything else is dark. As we reach the end of Xiaoi and Mr. Shen's extraordinary journey, their story stands as a powerful reminder of life's unexpected turns. What began as a clinical arrangement between strangers evolved into a profound connection that neither could have anticipated. Their unlikely union transformed both their lives, proving that authentic bonds can form in the most unlikely circumstances. Perhaps most significantly, Xiaoi's story reveals how our perceived flaws often contain our greatest power. Her blue blood, once hidden in shame, became the very thing that altered not just her own destiny, but Mr. Shen's life and countless others through their foundation's work.